Hello, America, and welcome to Happy Hour with Maestro Tim. I am Ced, the great Maestro Tim, and I have a great guest with me today, a good friend of mine and also colleague. He's the executive director of the Eugene Symphony. Please say hello to Scott Freck. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Hi, Tim. I'm good, thanks. Hi, Tim. Hi, everyone out there. Good to see you.
So, like all my other shows, let's begin with a drink. You're in Oregon, so what are you drinking? What have you brought to this?
I am in Oregon. Thank you for noticing, and thank you for inviting me to join you. I can see you've already started. Thanks a lot.
Well, I knew you were going to be my guest. I needed all the help I could get. So
I don't blame you at all. I'm going to be drinking a lovely West Coast style IPA from Oakshire Brewing right here in Eugene, Oregon. If you don't know already, Oregon is home to a great many things, including some really great beer. So Oakshire is just down the street, and I'm pouring it into our branded Eugene Symphony glassware that we have.
So I see SymFest. What does that mean?
It was a program we did 3 times. I haven't done one in a couple of years. It had the nucleus of it was an orchestra concert, of course, but it was surrounded by kind of community festival. Had several sort of ancillary stages with bluegrass bands and all kinds of things. We also had beer and wine tasting from some of the local purveyors, and then the concert in the middle. And then afterwards, we had a jazz lounge in the small theater and a dance floor right in the middle of the lobby with a DJ.
Awesome.
So the whole thing was about 5 hours long, super fun. And every ticket came with a glass. So
here,
there you go.
Cheers,
man.
To you, man.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time. Although, to be honest, you and I were texting over the Super Bowl game, which was one of the worst games
That
I've
was quite
seen.
the amusing conversation, most of it not fit for broadcast.
Terrible. So, for my viewing audience, or at least in the immediate area, tell us about your biography, because I already said you're the executive director of the Eugene Symphony, but there is an origin story because you and I essentially started our careers almost at the same time, although I think you had a year or two ahead of me.
Yes. Are you trying to say I'm old, Tim? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm a diplomat.
Yeah.
But you at least still have a hairline.
You're a diplomat only in your own mind.
That's correct,
yeah. So I grew up in the Portland, Oregon area, a couple hours north of here, as an amateur musician, student musician, but I loved it. I knew right away music was very important to me. I loved what it did for me. I loved what it did for people, to bring people closer together. Flash forward a little bit. I started my career at the Oregon Symphony, my hometown of Portland, which is a fine orchestra. Big news from them today. I don't know if you've noticed it, but they announced their new music director today. So I started there in September of 1991 as the very bottom of the rung of the marketing department. And then slowly things evolved and took on a sort of more operations role. That developed into other things, concert planning. My last role, which I think I had when you were there, was artistic administrator.
Yep.
And then that's where we met. You were brought on as one of the conducting apprentices, as a program that was run for, 6 or 7 years there. You were by far the best of the bunch, let me just say.
Checks in the mail, baby.
That's where we met. I think it would have been 1997 or so. So sneaking up on 24 years. We went on tour together. We went on a tour of southern and western Oregon, which was memorable. Some of it was memorable. Some of it I remember, I guess is a way of saying that. But we had some good times there. But I'll never forget, Tim, you did an amazing thing. We had a guest conductor named Julius Rudell, who had a long career at the New York City Opera, had been music director of a couple of different places, including he was the first music director of the Kennedy Center. And he was supposed to come to do a guest conducting week, and he fell ill and wasn't allowed to fly. It was one of those things like, the change in pressure would have been really bad for his ears. And so he had to stay on like literally no notice. James DePriest, the music director of the Oregon Symphony at the time, turned that whole concert over to you as conducting apprentice. And let me just tell you, that never happened before or after. You were the only one to get a full subscription week. And I remember you worked with the incredible recorder player, Mikola Petri.
Oh, my God, yeah.
You did a Schumann Symphony, I think, and you did a great job, Tim.
Thank you. I look back to that and I said, I can't believe they gave me that gig, because DePriest was in town, or was he?
Yeah, no, he was in town.
He could easily have, just said, I'll do it, but...
Yeah, I mean, at that point, the program, you each had, a little bit here and there. You were working with Murray Sidlin, who was the director of the program. He was resident conductor of the orchestra. And you got to do a work here and there, something on a youth concert, something, one piece, an overture on a full subscription series concert. But no one ever got a whole program, which, of course, you inherited. I think it was a day or two.
Yeah,
that
2 days out.
This. And that was, I'm sure, both electrifying and hellish for you at the same time.
I saved my underwear from that week.
You might want to rethink your laundry policy. But yeah.
So we'll get back to that because I have such fond memories of James DePriest, and we'll talk about the new music director when we get there.
I'll talk about Jimmy anytime you want.
Okay,
amazing man, incredible.
But
anyway, after 9 years at Oregon Symphony, my wife and I, we had our first child, who is now 20. Believe it or not.
Wait, stop right there, because I remember you actually organized your own wedding. You actually put it together, and I'll never forget going into your office, and you're like, you're getting off the phone to the, I don't know, the florist or something like that, and he says, "Of course I would organize my own wedding. It's what I do for a living." Do you still stand by that?
Well, not weddings. I mean,
obviously, but logistics.
I haven't done a wedding before or since, but I was in production at the time.
Sure.
Take all of these elements, figure out the timing of everything. Yeah, Leslie still talks about it. I had this whole binder that thick. I think I still have it somewhere. Anyway, so we had Elena, our daughter, and we decided we wanted to make a move. And Leslie wanted to be able to stay home at least for a little while. And believe me, that was not going to happen based on what I was making at the Oregon Symphony at the time. And so we moved lock, stock, and barrel to Raleigh, North Carolina when our daughter was 3 months old, where I became vice president and general manager of the North Carolina Symphony based in Raleigh. And an incredible time for me to do that. Obviously, incredibly transitional. Become a parent. I don't recommend this. Don't become a parent for the first time and then a month later start a brand new job where you don't know anybody.
Right.
It's not what you want. But made it through. But it was an incredible time because in that first couple of years, North Carolina Symphony, we opened a brand new concert hall, which is gorgeous, incredible acoustic, a really wonderful place, and a brand new summer venue. And then in that same time period, started a music director search. So it was busy, but an incredible time for me there. I loved all of my colleagues and really fine orchestra. Did a lot of really cool, innovative stuff. Really pushed the boat out on some programming ideas about how to make things really inclusive, really make this music for everyone. And was there almost 12 years. And then it seemed like the right time to sort of come home. So I did not grow up here in Eugene. I grew up in Portland, but my mom was actually born right here in this town that I live now. My grandparents lived here. I used to come visit them. And so when the opportunity came up, it seemed like a good fit. And so we moved back to the West Coast, and both kids have loved being here. My daughter's now a junior in college in Boston at Emerson College, and my son will graduate from high school in a couple of months, and he'll go off to University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. So it's been great. So it's almost 9 years here, and Eugene is incredible. I invite you all to come visit when such things are possible again. I'll give you a nice tour. We can have a good beer. There's some really good wine. Maybe I mentioned that. And a really fun regional orchestra. I mean, if you haven't heard of Eugene Symphony, one of the things we're best known for is sort of its lineage on music directors, starting with Maren Alsop, who is, I think, bar none, the most accomplished and celebrated woman conductor of all time. Maren was followed by Miguel Harth-Bedoya, who recently finished 20 years as music director of Fort Worth Symphony. John Carlo Guerrero, who's now the music director of Nashville Symphony. A man named Danai Orachev. And then our current music director, Francesco Lecce Chong, is very much of that same mold. Wow. He's just a remarkable guy. So it's sort of been the conducting launching pad, if you will. I'm not sure we like that term, but that's what most people recognize the symphony as.
Is that serendipity, or is there something in your strategies and bylaws that you're aiming for that when you're looking for a new music director?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tim. I think some of it comes back to the process, honestly. There's a really incredibly smart guy named Roger Sadak who kind of wrote the book, literally, on how to run a music director search. In fact, if you go to the League of American Orchestras website, that's our national service organization, there's a how-to manual on how to run a website, a music director search, and it's written by Roger, who initiated that process and was the chair of the search all 5 times since, including Francesco's appointment. So some of it is really good, thorough, inclusive, thoughtful process. And some of it, honestly, is being okay with short tenures. Marin was music director for 7 years, Miguel for 6, Giancarlo for 7, Daniel for 8. Francesco's now in his 4th year. But in most places, honestly, if you said, yeah, you're going to change music directors every 6 to 7 years, they'd go, oh, no, terrible idea. Right. That's a real weakness. Well, here, I think it's a strength. It allows us to attract really quality candidates, and it allows us to be nimble. It allows us to adapt to new programming ideas. We don't get too set in our ways. And there's something really sort of, I don't know, quaintly Western about that. That's one of the things about growing up in the West. Everything's kind of new. We don't have 400-year-old buildings here, like you do in on the West. Well, not on the East Coast, but in Europe, we're used to the idea of developing ideas and changing things over every so often. So I think that's part of it.
You got a chance to work with 2 of my favorite conductors, Jimmy DePriest. To take a chance on somebody like me. Yeah. And when you were in North Carolina, Grant Llewellyn, I got a chance to work with him very briefly. There was a brief time when he was kind of shopping around for music directorships, and he was up for Kansas City. And I remember seeing him work there, and I was really taken by him. And then you snatched him up in North Carolina. What do they have? What do the 2 of them have in common?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think they, at the core, they're humanity. Just how their music making comes from a generosity of spirit, of wanting to get people involved, wanting to capture people's attention, whether it's their colleagues on stage, whether it's people out in the audience. They're both incredible communicators. They both are able to translate complex concepts into, not dumb it down, but to turn it into an inspiring statement that anyone can understand and get. Different in many ways. Jimmy DePriest, rest him, one of the great influences of my life. I had the good opportunity to work with him for 9 years. Very closely the last couple of years there when I was artistic administrator. I would go to his apartment. And Jimmy, if you don't know, had quite a bit of health challenges over the course of his life. Remarkable man. Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of people in the area that are watching this don't realize that James DePriest had polio as an adult, and so walked around with all these braces. So walking and dealing with the after effects of polio was just the beginning of the many issues he had to deal with.
Yeah. He unlike most people who had polio in the 20th century, he did not get it as a child. He was 26, because it was eradicated in the United States by the 1960s. He was on a State Department tour of Thailand and contracted at the age of 26, and so really changed his life pretty dramatically. And it's only after that he went into conducting. He was primarily a jazz musician before that. And then another thing that may not be a household name kind of thing, but Jimmy was the nephew of Marian Anderson, the great contralto. Very famous for her concert she gave at the Lincoln Memorial when she'd been shut out by the Daughters of the American Revolution, the first African-American woman to sing at the Metropolitan Opera. And that was Aunt Marian to him. In fact, she moved to Portland right around the time you were there, Tim, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I got to meet her one night. She came to rehearsal, and it was like, this is royalty. This is musical royalty. And very brief conversation, but anyway, Jimmy, later in his life, also had kidney disease. And so he had to have dialysis 3 times a week. And so I would go to his apartment while he was getting dialysis, and we'd work on programs, while he's receiving treatment. Because otherwise, he was doing so many things. It was literally the only time he had to stay in one place for 3 hours. So anyway, remarkable man, incredible thinker, also a poet, a published poet in his own right. Yeah. And just one of the most generous souls I've ever encountered.
One of the unsung one of the unsung heroes of the conducting staff during our time at the Oregon Symphony was a guy by the name of Norm Layden.
Oh, Norman.
Norman. tell our audience about who he is and what he brought to that orchestra.
Well, Norman, one of a kind, first of all. Tall, elegant, played tennis until he was 85, I think. And he was primarily, in his early part of the career, an arranger. In fact, he was the very last arranger that Glenn Miller used. Thankfully, he was not on the tour when Glenn Miller's plane went down in the Atlantic. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to know Norman. Just incredible taste for taking popular music, jazz tunes, the American Songbook, and then laying them on an orchestra. And so just incredibly smart, thoughtful, and also just deeply loved classical music. And so he had a kind of a dual role. He sort of ran the pop series. He didn't sort of ran. He ran the pop series for 26 years or something like that. And that also would conduct classical music too. And just a remarkable man. If there's any fans of the band Pink Martini, are you familiar with?
We had them here. Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Early influence on Thomas Lauderdale and Pink Martini as they were forming. In fact, Norman did some of their very early arrangements. And if you listen very carefully on their second album called Hang On Little Tomato, the clarinet solo that opens and closes the title track, that's Norman playing.
Oh, is it really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
Great conductor, great arranger, also a really fine clarinet. So every time that song comes on, I always go, oh, Norman.
Right.
It's such another generous person. Just really, it was about everyone else besides him.
So now you're in a position where you're the sum of your experiences. Okay, so what of them have you taken with you in your current position?
Geez, Tim, you're pretty good at this.
You know, that's...
If this conducting thing doesn't work out,
just call it. I've got plenty of help here, maybe.
I see. The sum of my experiences. Yeah, I've had an incredible time. First of all, I mentioned earlier, I love music. I love the process by which it's made. I love going to rehearsal. I love hearing that first, bit of the very first rehearsal when you're like, okay, that's not very good.
Yeah, we've got a little work to do. Yeah.
We got a few things to fix, and the arc that it unfolds. And like I said, I love what it does for people. I love how it brings people together from different backgrounds. It's a great equalizer. It's a great sort of communications tool. I think of all the art forms, and I love visual art. I love theater. I'm not such a big ballet guy. Sorry, everyone. Opera, of all the art forms, music to me is the purest. Mm-hmm. You really don't need to know what's going on. It just can impact you. It can reach you where you are. And so with that in mind, me, the sum of my experiences, some of my favorite things, Tim, that I've done in my time is combining art forms and using music as the sort of universal translator, almost, like there's whichever blood type that can give to all the other blood type.
Yeah.
I forget what that's
called. Type O. Yeah.
Yeah. It sort of has a way of binding things together. So I've done really fun things with theater groups where you take an existing work of theater, combine it with an existing work of music, and make magic out of that way. Like I said, talking about SymFest, right? Who would think you could have an evening that starts with a bluegrass band, has an orchestra concert in the middle, and ends with a DJ, pumping out Saturday Night Fever. I mean,
right.
And yet it all makes sense. It's about a shared human experience. It's about reminding ourselves that we have way more in common than we have that's not in common.
I'm going to go check our chat room, and then I'm going to ask you more questions about fusion, because fusion, I agree, is either it's either the mother's milk of everything, or it can be either, put it this way, it can be highly successful or not. I'm looking.
Well, I think when it fails, it's because you're trying to graft things together in an inorganic way. You're trying to slap a new coat of paint on something. It really needs to be it needs to elevate whatever's being included. It needs to elevate all the forms rather than having one be subservient to the others. So, I know we're getting pretty wackadoo here.
Right. So Jane McDonald says Scott rocks.
Hi, Jane. Thank you. That she's watching from here in Eugene.
Excellent.
And I don't too.
Mike Kvach, he says the Ninkasi Brewing Company. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right here in Eugene too. That's the big dog in town. Oakshire's the next biggest. They make great beers too. What I like about Oakshire is their production size is a little smaller. They're able to experiment a little bit more. Ninkasi's production's so big now. They only come out with a new beer every so often because they got to sell a ton of it to justify all the equipment. Sorry, we're getting nerdy on beer too.
Well, that's like one of life's simpler pleasures. So I like how you set up fusion, because a lot of people think fusion in just purely musical terms. A little bit of pop with this and a little bit of that, gospel, throw it all in, you got fusion. And that can either be extremely successful or not. But you're also talking about fusion of experience.
Yeah.
And does that inform you at every concert, or are you just looking at the occasional, yearly production like SimFest?
Oh, that's a great question. Here I can't remember where you are in Iowa with the number of main stage subscription concerts.
Yep.
Here we have 9, and some of them are fairly traditional in terms of program and approach. Some of them, especially more and more, have been 1 or 2 a year, going to have other elements, whether they're visual or theatrical or a combination, other art forms that get involved. Some of my favorite things we've done in the last couple of years, starting, I think it was 2018, and I'm really glad we did it when we did. We did a program called The Four Seasons of the Mackenzie River. So it's taking one of the great sort of pillars of our art form, Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. It's almost ubiquitous. To quote Jimmy DePriest, it's almost become audio wallpaper.
Yeah,
phrase he used to use. But how can we make that relevant, make it regional? How can we make it impactful here? So what we did is we invited amateur photographers, professional photographers too if they want, but primarily just people. And the Mackenzie River is really one of the most glorious wild rivers in America. It starts in the Cascade Mountains, about 2 hours drive east of here, and flows down just on waterfalls, wild salmon runs. It's really an incredible place. And we invited the public to go out and take pictures and video of the river throughout the entire year and then submit them. And then we had sort of a review panel, and involved, 2 of the local mayors and a couple of people from the art museum. And we curated together videos of our place and then showed it on a big screen above the stage while the orchestra played, and Rachel Barton Pine as soloist played the Vivaldi. It was really special. We partnered with the Mackenzie River Trust, which is a land conservancy dedicated to, make sure that the watershed is going to be there. It's actually our source of drinking water here in Eugene. So there's a functional component. It was really meaningful, totally sold out, the highest at that point. Yeah, still the highest grossing subscription concert ever. And people felt such great ownership. I mean, the people who had taken the pictures got to come. They were weeping seeing their image with the orchestra. Right. As it happens, I'm glad we did this. We shot archival video of that, which we normally don't. And I'm glad we did for 2 reasons. One, we were able, when the pandemic started and no longer able to do concerts, we took that archival video and turned it into a something that the public could see. So which is great. So we got to preserve that concert and share it again. And then, of course, maybe you heard out there that there was a terrible wildfire in that area, and just ravaged about, 45 miles of the river area. And so much of what's in the images from that production is gone.
Yeah, I was about to say, what the hell's wrong with Portland? I mean, you've had fires, you've had riots. I mean, it's almost biblical. I'm waiting for locusts. It doesn't.
Don't beg that for me.
Well, it doesn't jive with the Portland I knew. Now, albeit that's 24 years ago, but
yeah. It's a dynamic place. We'll call it that.
Yeah.
So, but back to your question about, does fusion inform everything? No, but that was a really great example of an organic choice to combine imagery with music in a way that really worked. Another one, and we can spend a whole nother hour on this. Again, we happened to shoot archival video of this, but and this will blow your mind, Tim. We came within like 20 tickets of selling out a concert anchored by 2 works by Alexander Scriabin.
Ah! Wow! Yeah! How did you manage that? Because, man, that's
for those of you listening at home, Alexander Scriabin is pretty esoteric.
Yeah.
Pretty funky, late 19th century, early 20th century Russian composer. I mean, crazy. So some other time I'll tell you about it. But it involved interpreting one of his works he called it a light organ.
Oh, yeah, the color organ,
Yeah, which when he wrote it in 1910, they weren't so good at that. in 2019, we're a little bit better at that.
Right.
So we were able to translate that into an actual dynamic instrument that could be played, that had color. It was an 8-foot org with 32,000 LEDs on it. I just rented it. I didn't have to build it.
Good.
But it was a local tech company that had made it. And we worked a way to translate the software and to make a MIDI keyboard to control it. Unbelievable. We also, and that, by the way, I think it's on our website if you want to see what came of that. We also had students making animated videos to interpret short works like Debussy's Clair de Lune, something from the Water Music by Handel. I mean, really interesting to explore the concept of how does color and sound interact. Am I going to do that every single time? No.
Because actually, I'm going to check the chat room again, because what I really want to also get into now is the business of things, because people like me can come around and destroy your budget in no time flat. And so
if you let you, yeah.
If you let me. And so I want to when I get back after the chat room, I want to talk a little bit about the balance between fiscal responsibility and artistic vision. Yeah. All right, see what's going on here. Denny acknowledges that there's a pretty good Pinot Noir in Oregon every once in a while. Maybe.
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah. That's all the comments that I'm seeing. Again, I'm having a hard time seeing all the comments on my screen, but that's all we got right now. So, what's your favorite Pinot Noir these days?
Oh,
local, of course.
Well, if you're shopping from Iowa, you probably want to go to, let me see, Domaine Soren, which is up near Portland. It's unbelievable. That's probably the best, I think, in Oregon. Locally, I'm a big fan of Broadley, Broadley. That's about 25 minutes north of here. It's wonderful, just wonderful. We're wine club members there, so.
I got Darren off to the side wondering what's going on with my computer, so I'm going to go back to the chat room. So, fix this, young buck. Make it like shake your voodoo smoke and make it work for me.
I'm trying to find my voodoo smoke, but
well, we'll just burn it in effigy then.
I think that's actually the most recent comment. Come on, people.
Oh, okay, well, there you go.
Nah, I'm boring to tears. That's the problem.
So, the business of things. I always feel bad for executive directors, because especially when they come into a new job, everyone's expecting them to fix everything but not change anything. And then there's also things about, why don't we just hire Yo-Yo Ma for everything? But yet you also have to stand in front of the board showing viable numbers. Mm-hmm. When was the first time you actually had to take that position? Was it when you came back to Eugene, or did you have experience with that when you were with the other orchestras of walking that line between fiscal responsibility and artistic desires?
When was the first time? Well, it probably wasn't at Oregon, because at that point James DePriest had been music director for 18 years, and he also was very sensitive and didn't want to overstretch. He cared about, and let me just put this plug in. For conductors coming up, you do want to care about fiscal responsibility too, because you want there to be an orchestra, after your big idea. But it certainly wasn't my job to tell Jimmy that I think that's a bad idea. Certainly, by the time I was working with Grant Llewellyn at North Carolina, we came up with some stuff that we wanted to do but didn't make sense. Especially during the economic downturn of 2009, 2010. Around then, there were things that were just not feasible, not possible. And certainly being executive director here, there's more of an impact, more of a conversation. But I'll tell you, Tim, I'm not one to just play it safe. And just the traditional way is, the way we do it is the way we do it. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing things like, Vivaldi with imagery and,
right.
A concert anchored by 2 works by Scriabin. I think you have to keep innovating. This is not a static art form. It never has been. And the idea that there's this canon that we must, bow to is just plain wrong. All art forms have to evolve. They all have to bring in new influences. They have to reconsider old influences. We have to think of things in context. And so I'm a big fan of swinging for the fence. You have to be safe about it. I've one more I think we've won more than we've lost in terms of financial. But we've had a couple of, wish we had done that. But you don't really know until you try. There's no guarantees. I mean, yes, Yo-Yo Ma is a guarantee. I can tell you, he comes to your city, you're probably going to sell out. You're going to do pretty well. Unfortunately, law of supply and demand says when there's limited supply and a lot of demand, that's great. But there's only so much supply. Yo-Yo is not going to come to Iowa every year. It's not going to come to Eugene every year. You might get him once every 8 years. In which case, what else are you going to do? And so you just need to be, I think you need to be sort of wise about your innovation, but really be innovative. Don't be safe. Don't just assume it's not possible. It's better if you have some risk capital involved. One of the great things about being here in Eugene, there's an endowment that's attached to the Performing Arts Center that basically is there for the resident companies to try new things. I mean, I wish every arts center had it. And I know you're all jealous, but I mean, those two projects I mentioned, the Four Seasons one and the Scriabin, would not have been possible if we didn't have this grant to get us off the ground. In those cases, we took that grant money and made even more, and they were thrilled about it, and that's why they're there. But you do need a source of innovation. So if you have any Orchestra Iowa board members listening out there, Tim, let me just tell you, Tim's a smart guy. I think he has a good sense of what works and what doesn't. But don't be afraid of a little bit of risk, because there's no reward without risk.
Right. You
have to take some chances.
Eugene and Cedar Rapids actually have some interesting demographic similarities.
Okay.
You are a university town as well, correct?
Yeah, very much so.
Iowa City is 25 minutes just down the road. So essentially, although I don't want any letters about this, but essentially we're a similar metropolitan area. Okay. There's a lot of differences in culture, even in 25 minutes differently, but essentially it's the same large group of people that are coming to our concerts. There are those who have gotten used to consuming their arts for free. Because one of the great advantages with the university is that there's a lot of student art going on that's not ticketed. Do you fall into that sort of challenge when you're trying to establish ticketing prices at all?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, Eugene, when I was interviewing for this job almost 9 years ago exactly, one of the board members at the time said, well, the good news is Eugene is a very arts-rich environment. And the bad news is Eugene is an very arts-rich environment. So we've got 2 ballet companies here. We've got an opera, we've got 6 theaters, we've got a chamber orchestra, we've got a string quartet that's based here. There's so much art to be had, which is great. And that's great for me because I like going to other people's stuff almost as much, maybe sometimes more than doing ours. But I wouldn't say it's competition exactly, because there's not another symphony orchestra across the street that we have to worry about, elbowing us out of the way. But there's just a lot of opportunity for cultural enrichment, for cultural participation. But at the same time, you have to be sensitive to everybody else's stuff. And then there's the university, as you say. I failed to mention the Oregon Bach Festival, which is one of the great, summer festivals anywhere in the country. So there's just a lot here. And what you can't do is be shy about saying that what you do has value, right? I mean, there is often a sense of, we need to make things cheaper. Well, we do that by making student tickets accessible at $10, not just Rush, but anytime. If you want to buy a ticket for March, you can do that now. Not that we have concerts right now, but that is accessible. We have just a really broad array of music education and community engagement programs that does bring our world out into the community, and most of those programs are free. But for the flagship experience, those subscription concerts, those have value. You want people to believe that they're investing in themselves almost as much as they're investing in the organization, and they are. You can do just about if you have $50 to spend. Would you spend it to take yourself to an orchestra concert? Maybe. You should think about it, because it's going to change you in a way that some other things won't. $50 on a new pair of sneakers is not going to change you as much as going to a really moving cultural experience that you share with several other 1,000 people that make you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. I mean, that's really an investment in yourself almost as much as an investment in your community.
Right. So it looks like we're kind of on the downhill run of this pandemic.
Oh, let's hope so, Timmy.
Let's hope so, knock on wood. So what are the lessons learned this past year? So what have you done to adapt to your current situation that you might actually carry over next season as part of your regular operations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm actually asking myself and my admin team here that all the time. There's going to be an after. I believe that this will end. It's not going to be the same place that we left. It's the build back better thing I've heard about. I think that's going to be our challenge. First of all, I guess I should stop and check in on what we have been doing, because we haven't been able to have big concerts with thousands of people. Nobody has, and that's probably a ways off. And I know that's your situation too. We have been trying to be innovative. I mentioned reusing archival video that we shot, a couple of years ago, including the Scriabin, including it. But we didn't do that a lot. So one thing I will take with us is we're going to start videoing everything. Because we just don't know. Ed Carr
right now is like nodding his head, because what we found was like, oh my God, we've been doing this for how many years and we've got no archival video? Really?
Yeah.
My God. Yeah. I mean, duh. Yeah.
Yeah, we have audio. I'm sure you do too.
Sure. Yeah.
You probably have a radio broadcast series there. That's great. We did stop and sort of repurpose some of that audio into more of a magazine style, and did it with a local NPR station, and that was great. But, one of the things I know we're going to do, and our hall, frankly, thankfully, has invested in some infrastructure. And so we're going to be able to do that fairly cheaply. They got a bunch of HD cameras. We can just lock them off, take the SD cards, and, if we never use it, that's fine. At least we can. In the meantime, we've also been trying to stay engaged with our community, just as you're doing with this program. We had a cool thing that our music director, Francesco, did. He had a conversation by Zoom with 3 of his predecessors, Marin Alsop, Giancarlo Guerrero, and Miguel Hartadoya. And the 4 of them just talked for an hour, and then we recorded that and edited, and so that's cool. Starting to Thursday night, we have a brand new program. It's a string quartet. It's a program called Symphony Connect that we've been doing for about 5 years, and it's not in the hall. It's never been performed in the hall, not once. It's mostly been at human service agencies, places like low-income housing, a center for people with cognitive impairment and psychiatric disability, an at-risk high school. So people who would never come to the Performing Arts Center, couldn't afford a ticket, probably couldn't even get on the bus to get to the Holt Center. That's our place. But still deserve to have live music in their lives, still deserve to be around other people and have a shared experience. So we've been going out to them for about 5 years. We took that program and translated it. We recorded it in January. Until then, performing arts centers have still been shut down, but houses of worship are not. So we actually partnered with a local synagogue and used their space, recorded that, been editing of that. We just finished it today. It'll be premiered on Thursday night. And then next month, the regulations have changed in Oregon. Not next month, next week. We will go back to our hall and record a string orchestra program for video and stream that. And that's the next couple of months. And then after that, we'll see. Your question is, what are we going to take from this? I think we haven't even touched on what else changed in 2020. I think there was a great awakening, a great reckoning on race and social justice. And so we are really trying to change the representation of what's being played on stage, to hear more voices. While I love Beethoven as much as the next guy, there's a lot of great music that has been written that has not been heard. People of color that has just been ignored for a long time, and some incredible voices working today, and incredible things being said. And so I think our programming is going to evolve. I think by the time we get back to full, it'll be really meaningful when we get back to having an audience and to see how that audience involves. We may be making some changes, and I think that's good. Like I said, the art form has to evolve.
I think we're in a really great spot because people are going to be so hungry to go back for a concert experience. You have, I think we all have a little bit more leeway to experiment now.
I think we have a mandate to experiment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. What keeps you up at night? Because I'll tell you, one of the strangest irrational fears I have So literally, almost to the day, it's been a year since we've shut down because of the pandemic.
Yeah, almost exactly.
And I'm thinking, good God, I haven't conducted in a year. There's going to come that time where I have to, I walk in and we start a rehearsal. And I'm thinking, good God, do I still know how to do this?
This is fun.
Thank you. And then I'm lost. Then just windmill, and blame somebody else.
Do this a lot.
Do the voodoo, baby. No, but seriously, irrational or otherwise, what keeps you awake at night as you look into next year?
Yeah, I was just on a panel discussion last Friday with other colleagues around the Northwest. We were talking a little bit about that. What's next? How do we? And some of it is we've sort of become used to the uncertainty of it all. We used to plan things 2 to 3 years in advance, and you had a pretty good chance it was going to go more or less as you thought it up. And then we sort of adjusted to, okay, we don't know anything about anything. Let's just think really small. And so what keeps me up at night is how do we get back from where we are, which is really not being able to plan very far in advance. I mean, literally, I just got off a phone call with some people working on what we're going to be doing in April of this year.
Right.
Normally we're talking not about April of the next year. We're talking about April of the following year. And now we've gotten used to this, we have to work this kind of time scale. Right. What keeps me up is how do we get back from this? And I don't know what this means anymore, but how do we get back from this kind of planning horizon to longer? And how do we translate? What's going to matter? I think all orchestras everywhere have had to become far more nimble. The big orchestras in this country, Tim, and you know this very well. It's sort of like steering an oil tanker. If you want to make a left turn, you got to start 30 miles in advance. Well, they can't now. So, our orchestras our size are a little bit more nimble. We've got, different dynamics, but none of us have been speedboats where you turn like that. The question is, how do we go back from this to a more long-term, more strategic approach? And I think you just have to go to your core values. You have to go to what got you there, with the things that you really care about, the things that you're really sure of. And some of that is about how you want to serve your community.
All right. Before we sign off, I'm going to go back to the chat room, see if anybody's still there.
You kicking me out, Tim? Is that what you're doing?
Kurt Wasco. Actually, you kind of met him the other day as we were texting during the Super Bowl. Kurt Wasco.
Okay. You didn't tell me. I know one of the people who was on that text chain. You didn't tell me who else was on there.
Okay, well, two of them actually are. So Kurt Wasco says, watch Lawrence Welk reruns, Tim, keep you sharp. And Kurt, all I can say is, I love it.
It sounds like a very Kurt thing to say.
Yeah, the other person that you met as we were texting during the football game, Danny Redmond, he's a very talented jazz pianist and also on the board, and he's loving this. The mandate to experiment, absolutely.
You just can't stay static. I'm sometimes comforted by the following quote. We've all heard about the graying audience. How our art form is dying off, and that is a concern. But when I'm worried about that, I remember an article that I once read that had that exact headline. That classical music is dead. The audience is graying. When this generation dies, there will be nothing left. You might as well pack up and go home.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing horribly, but the article was written in 1939.
Sure.
So it's and Jimmy DePriest used to talk about this. If you're doing good work, some people who may not be. It's not where they are in their life when they want to hear it, but you reach a point where you want some substance. You want an experience that is bigger than you,
right?
And that's going to stick with you. So it's we can't stay still.
Kathy Varney wants you to repeat your recommendations for Pinots from your area.
Okay, well I've got three from the Eugene area. Broadley is my favorite. Broadley Vineyards. Benton Lane does great work. And then Sylvan Ridge, we have a board member, Andrew Stiltner, who's the owner of that. Those are my three. Although, come out here anytime and we'll give you a nice tour. There's about, 25 wineries within half an hour drive. And the beer's great, too.
Well, stick around, Scott. As I sign off, I want to say goodbye to you, more personally afterwards, but I miss you, man. And thank you for saying yes, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. I can't believe I'm calling you wise, but
I wouldn't call it that.
But you're sharing your perspectives, because this is what I find really fascinating doing this for, good God, how many episodes have we done this, Ed? 30, 35, 6? As I talk to other music directors, executive directors, artists from across the country, I mean, we're all facing the same problem, but each organization, we may all be the symphonies, but culture is different. And how every organization is handling this particular challenge is unique. And I think anybody who comes into this conversation thinking that one size fits all of how to get through this doesn't know what they're talking about. And
no, I agree. It is very localized. I mean, taste is localized, culture is localized, and I think that you need to turn that to your advantage. I mean, you need to be an orchestra. You already are, but I know you know this, Tim. But you need to be the orchestra for Iowa. What matters there, and I think particularly true of artists and composers. I mean, I'm a huge proponent for commissioning. I mean, I know you have. But let me just, again, for any reluctant donors or board members, why do we need to pay to have somebody make new music when we have 350 years of music to draw from? And the answer is, what do you want people to say 100 years from now to understand about who you were now? This is how we leave some of ourselves behind for future generations to know us by. Furthermore, it's how we connect with new audiences. Sorry, that's a soapbox of another color, but you know what I'm talking about.
Indeed, I do. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone else, for joining me this weekend for this episode. Next week, good God, who is on for next week? Do you know? Ed, some of my musicians are going to be. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot. Some of my musicians are going to be joining us. So I'm going to be. Touching base with some of our string players to see, my goodness, how are they managing through all this incredible turmoil, and how they managed to get through this far into the year. So join us next week as we sort of sit down with some of the string players from Orchestra Iowa. And in the meantime, thanks to you, Scott, and thanks to everybody for joining in. We'll see you next time. Cheers.